Hi there. Today I want to show you some ways that you can beautify your dotted journals by using stencils. It's easy, it's fun, and I'll be using mostly stencils that I've designed for Stencil Girl products, but you can use stencils that you already have, and then we'll do a project at the end. I'm Valerie and welcome to my studio. Let's get started.
1. Stencil the edge of your pages with an overall pattern stencil. Here I'm using water to spritz some watercolor. Now I spritzed it a little bit earlier so I can go in with my cosmetic sponge here, and it's already activated. And I'm just tapping around the edge of the page, tapping a little bit harder at the very edge of the page and lighter towards the center of the pages so there's not a hard edge. That looks good. And now I just go around the page and repeat it, just like that. Okay, now here's an example of how I use that, and it's a little bit on just the edge of the page here and around. It's very light and subtle. 2. Mask off your stencil to leave room for a quote, title, or image, etc.
If I'm doing an overall stencil like this, sometimes I tape it down just because it will hold it in place better. And then this one fits exactly in a B6, or this is at 7 by 10. You can also mask off part of a stencil. You can just cut a circle, square, any shape. This stencil happens to come with these stencils here, and so I'm just going to put this here, line up on the dots so that it's straight. That's one thing very handy. And I'm just going to tape it here like this, and then stencil around here. I'm also going to use a cosmetic sponge like I did on the swirl stencil that just went around. Let's see. I sprayed my watercolors with just a spritz of water, and now I'm going to go in and just tap. Still have gold on my sponge, which I kind of like the gold, so I left it there. I can kind of lift up here and see how that looks. So there you go. Well, I have this out. I may as well do the black line now.
I'll call this one 2B, tracing around the masked edge of the stencil and adding gold dots.
Then go in with a gel pen, metal gel pen, metallic.
Then it's easy to add more dots with pen and other pen work if you'd like. And there's room for a short quote or a title in the middle. 3. Stenciling the edge of the page and cutting it out, also adding a border. I'm also using watercolor, spritzing my paints to activate them, and using a cosmetic sponge, just like I did in the other demos. I also keep a piece of paper on hand to blot my sponge, because if there's too much water or paint on the sponge, it will bleed under the stencil. Oftentimes when I'm painting and cutting the edge of a page, I use a stencil that has a cut edge, but in this case, it's not that way. It's just a border. So you may want to take a look at your stencils and see what stencils could actually make a good cut border or Dutch door. Now I'm using another part of the stencil to make a painted border on the other side of the page. Okay, now I'm ready to cut the edge. I always think it's kind of amazing how an edge of a page can be transformed by stencil and simple cutting. And then if you add a piece of paper or a color-coordinated sheet border on the other side, it goes on to the next page. 4. Stenciling the back pocket of the notebook and the end pages.
Stenciling can also be used to decorate the pocket of the journal. So I'm going to replicate this on this one.
First, I put my stencil in place and then I tape it down in at least 2 spots, one on each edge. And then I'm putting this piece of copy paper as a blotting paper inside the pocket. So when I sponge on top, I can just use that to kind of slop over the edge so I don't have to worry about the other side. I'm going around just like I did in the other demos with the tapping motion using my cosmetic sponge. And then also I have to reactivate the paint because I'm using quite a bit more paint to cover more area on this stencil. There, that looks good. I take the paper out of the pocket and put it on the other side because now I'm going to paint the end pages with this part of the stencil. You may notice at this point I'm kind of swiping the cosmetic sponge with the paint across the stencil, and that's because it has just the right amount of paint on that so it goes really fast. Now I'm going to go in with a metallic pen, a copper pen that matches the shimmery color that I painted, and I'm just doodling on the stencil part, or the part that's not stenciled, and I'm doing this on the whole thing, just adding little dots and lines wherever I want to in the stars, and also radiating rays down from each of the stars. Now I'm going to go in with a crisp white acrylograph pen, and I'm going to doodle in the same way or a similar way that I doodled with a copper pen, but this time the white on the painted background. So I'm putting some swirls, kind of galaxy type shapes in here that I'm also going to go in with stars and probably some dots as well. I'm very pleased with this pocket, and I hope you're inspired too. And now it's time to add some of my things for the pocket. And also what I love to do is mix the stenciling with washi tape. So I'm taking this washi tape from Archer and Olive here, and it has some coppery, shimmery colors in it, as well as you can see kind of the stars there. And I think that would be a lovely addition to the edge on this side of the end pages. The pocket is already put to good use. Now for number 5, stencil a frame and heading spaces to put quotes in. There are some stencils that are just suited for dotted journals, and stencils that have frames are one of those. This stencil does a lot of other cool things, but I'm just going to show you how I'm going to stencil the edge of a frame here. I'm using some stencil brushes I have to apply the Distress inks. And I have two colors here. I'm going to mix them on the border. After I rub the brush onto the pigment, then I'm using a circular motion and pressing down as I apply that to the paper and the stencil. Now for the second color applied with another brush. Now I'm using another part of the stencil to make a header or a heading. Now, this shape could be used for lots of things, so you might want to check out your stencils and see, are there any shapes cut in there that can be used as a heading or as some other container for words? That's what I'm doing here with the same method I used to do the frame. There. Those look like good containers for my words to go in. Six, use letter stencils to make a background pattern and banners to make headings and focal points in your journal.
Like the frame stencil, letter stencils and banner stencils are oftentimes made for journals like these. So I just thought I'd briefly show you a few ways that I use them. One is I can use a letter stencil as a background pattern, and that's kind of a theme, or of course a number stencil too. And then there's banner stencils of various sorts out there. Here is this one here that I stencil, and then I outline in ink so that it doesn't look like a stencil. These letters are also stenciled, and then these two letters are stenciled with one of these stencils that I taped off, stenciled here, and then drew around with a thicker pen around the stencil area there, and then a thinner pen again. You can also add other shapes, so this is a stencil here too. Thought you might want to see that. This was all done watercolor and pen, and this here, this birthday was another kind of banner, and you may see banners or even shapes in other stencils that could easily be used as a heading for a title. Or I think I have one that shows a month here going the other way. Here's another month. So on these I stenciled in with gelatos after I outlined them in pen, and then went in with colored pencil. So a bunch of mediums can be used, and of course mixed with washi tape. Just thought I would show you a few of those before we do our final project.
7, make a simple heart stencil to make a garland with hanging hearts. Let's do it.
For this demo, I'm going to show how I take these stenciled hearts and make patterns like this. And so let's get started on that. I'm just going to cut them out. And then, I mean, just like when we were kids and did this, it's the same thing. And just cut them out like we did when we were little. There you go. Cardstock might be a little better. This is heavier than copy paper though. I could use watercolor, but I'm using these inks instead. I still want it up here. Okay, now I can go in and doodle around a bit. Let's see, I'll let those dry.
I'm using a fine liner pen here and just making super casual, non-perfect loops. The only thing that I'm being mindful of is that where the point comes off of the page, you know, where it goes up there, I'm making sure that it is where the line is straight down to the center of the heart. And that's because I'm going to draw like strings, so there's hearts on a string there, just like here going down. And then I'm going to go back over more than one time and more than one type of pen. I could also put dots on these lines too and make it kind of like a lit garland. I've done that and it's very effective. But right here, I just thought I'll keep it super simple, casual, and then I loosely outline the hearts as well. And I'm putting in the strings right now with a little kind of bow that the heart is hanging there on. And I'll go around first with a black pen, and then I'm going to go in with the acrylograph paint pens on top and also doodle in the hearts. There, the page is ready for some loving and beautiful thoughts. Thanks for joining me. For more inspiring tutorials and information on stencils, check out my website and blog at valerieshodine.com.